Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a slightly different approach. We have this really condensed set of sources, a sequence of entries, philosophical observations, really, labeled Dynaxiom 3331 right through to 3340. They act almost like, I don't know, 10 key snapshots taken at a specific moment, looking hard at tech, history, human behavior. So let's kick off with the first major theme that jumps out. It's about the reality we're all swimming in. This overwhelming, often contradictory digital world, we're sort of calling it navigating the digital frog.
Right. And we dive straight in with Dynaxiom 3333. This one introduces a really fascinating idea that the internet, even though it seems boundless, actually hides just as much as it shows us. It talks about something like 99% of data being, well, it calls it informational dark matter.
That comparison, dark matter, that's pretty powerful. Like in cosmology, right, it's there, it has weight, but we can't see it, can't easily measure its real impact.
Yeah.
And the source is saying the stuff we do see, the popular stuff, isn't visible because it's vital for, like, survival.
Not necessarily, no. It suggests visibility comes from human agreement. Civilization decides what's important, then figures out how to survive within that framework. The mechanism isn't utility, it's popularity. Visibility. And it gives a really stark example for this effect, noting that by 2025, social media had pretty much built the operating system for the world we live in.
Yeah.
Which just makes all that dark matter, the unpopular info, kind of irrelevant by default.
Okay, so if most information is invisible, and what is visible is driven by shifting popularity, what does that do to the idea of truth? Which brings us neatly to Dynaxiom 3337. And this one makes a pretty bold claim. After a generation online, truth can only be metaphorical.
Wow. Yeah, it's a strong statement. And you see the erosion of, let's say, external authority here.
Yeah.
The source points to things like LLMs. Say an LLM summarizes 3 original sources, properly cited ones. But then you build your argument just on that summary, ditching the original citations. Well, the source material's authority just vanishes instantly. It might sound true, perfectly plausible, but the foundation is, it's processed. Copied and pasted.
But then how do you guard against that? I mean, if the external checks are shaky, what does the source say we should use instead?
Dynaxiom 3337 suggests a pretty radical shift, a new metric. It argues we should treat information more like pitch or rhythm in music. If it sounds wrong, if it feels out of tune with reality as you perceive it, then it is wrong. It really forces you back onto your own internal intuitive compass because the external signposts are just too easy to fake or disconnect from their origin. And what's key here is the sheer work involved in keeping that internal compass calibrated.
Which leads us right into Dynaxiom 3338. That's just a short, punchy one, but powerful. Doubt requires continuous validation, whereas certainty does not. It really highlights the mental effort needed just to stay uncertain, to keep tuning that internal metric you mentioned.
Absolutely. And all that effort is happening while the ground is constantly shifting under our feet. Which brings us to theme 2, new technologies and new lenses. The point here isn't just about new gadgets. It's about technology giving us entirely new ways to see and process the world.
Yeah, that comes through really clearly in Dynaxiom 3332. It observes that new technologies create new highways, or new worlds that then get populated fast. The source uses the analogy that LLMs are now in the workflow, right? Just like Word and Excel basically became fundamental tools back in, 1995.
Exactly, that status. And achieving that status often kicks off this secondary, kind of unexpected thing, reverse order inspiration. The entry mentions how using Photoshop back in the late 90s, which was really just a digital darkroom then, it actually got a lot of people interested in going back and getting serious about using a physical camera.
Wait, hang on. Inspiring people to go back to older skills. How does the source see that playing out with today's tech?
Well, think about AI tools, maybe an AI music generator. Someone uses it, gets these complex, cool results instantly, but then maybe they hit a wall. They realize what they want isn't just the finished song, but the feeling of making it, the process. So that might inspire them to go back and actually learn piano.
Right.
Or guitar. The digital tool sparked the interest, revealed the joy of creating, which then leads back to the underlying craft.
That idea of skill and experience building up, that connects to Dynaxiom 3333, doesn't it? About the lenses. The older you are, the more lenses you have. I liked the comparison it made. A photographer with a whole collection of cameras, lenses, prints, all that experience versus someone who's only ever used a smartphone.
Right. And the entry develops that by looking at how current tech acts as these extensions that really reshape how we see things. Take drone cameras. Okay, they give you an aerial view physically, but they also force this wider, sometimes uncomfortable understanding about surveillance being everywhere. And the source says this exposure pushes people one of two ways, either towards a really cynical view of the world, or maybe surprisingly, a more hopeful one, kind of like experiencing the overview effect.
Ah, the overview effect. For anyone listening who might not know it, that's the feeling astronauts often describe, right? That sense of awe, connectedness, seeing Earth from space. So the tech forces such a wide view, it actually changes how you feel about your place in it all.
Precisely. It's not just changing what you see, but your whole emotional connection to the world, to others. And that difference in reaction ties into Dynaxiom 3336. This one uses a biological metaphor. Technology acts like a thermometer. It reveals a fever, an immune response in some people when they encounter a foreign idea or change, while others, exposed to the exact same thing, show no symptoms at all. They remain asymptomatic.
And this ability or inability to react to these big shifts, that leads us into our third theme. This one feels, well, pretty intense. It looks at historical patterns, karma, and something called engineered stress.
Yeah, it gets heavier here. We start with individual patterns in Dynaxiom 3334. It's a reminder, really, we're all pattern seekers, that's human, but we tend to be quite individualistic about it. We're kind of selfish about our patterns. We mostly see what we already expect or want to see.
And that individual focus contrasts sharply, violently almost, with the big historical pattern laid out in Dynaxiom 33333. This one is, it's arguably the most sobering entry here. And we absolutely have to note the date given, September 11th, 2025.
Yes, the date is critical. The observation itself is chilling. It describes a moment of, well, profound cyclical irony. The source talks about people in Chicago feeling genuinely terrorized by the sight of troops and Humvees on their own streets. And the crucial reflection is that this atmosphere is mirroring Baghdad, a city the U.S. invaded and occupied a generation before, supposedly to remove a dictator.
Let's just pause on that. Chicago mirroring Baghdad. That implies a kind of deep societal blowback. The entry specifically mentions national karma, the possibility of a U.S. dictator emerging a generation after that original intervention.
It does, and the source material backs this up by pointing to historical warnings. It references things said back in October 2001, warnings that you just can't eliminate an ideology or the idea of terrorism with force. And it notes this was proven out by the rise of homegrown terrorism, citing figures like John Walker Lind, visible even by the 4th anniversary of 9/11, 20 years prior to this entry. It's basically saying these patterns of conflict, of repression, they inevitably cycle back.
That feeling of being under siege, whether it's historical forces or political instability, seems to connect right into the psychological points in Dynaxiom 3339. This one really digs into the difference between what we call addiction and what it calls engineered stress.
Yes, and the source is very clear on this. It says, look, if you deliberately put someone under immense nonstop stress, and they start acting in ways you might describe as drunken or erratic, that's not necessarily on them. They're reacting to an external pressure, the stress, not some inherent failing or lack of willpower.
So behavior that maybe looks like addiction, constantly checking screens, making self-destructive choices could actually be a result of external manipulation, not just personal weakness.
That's exactly what it suggests. The pattern of control described is one of ego-driven domination, intentionally making others seem like the enemy or setting them up to fail under impossible pressure. And it gives this powerful geopolitical analogy. Entire societies acting as if they're incapacitated by alcohol, driving drunk off cliffs, taking passengers with them, while maybe appearing like functioning alcoholics day to day. They seem rational on the surface, but they keep repeating these huge destructive actions because they're fundamentally impaired by that engineered stress.
That's a very modern way to diagnose system failure. So if we want to escape these cycles, history repeating, manufactured stress, the source, seems to suggest we need a fundamental shift in how we approach understanding itself. Which takes us to our final theme, the power of redefinition.
Yes, Dynaxiom 3340 captures this essential idea. The core insight is pretty simple but profound. Once you define, or maybe redefine one thing, it gets much easier, maybe even tempting to define or redefine other things too. And crucially, this process also makes it easier to revisit old ideas, familiar things, but with fresh eyes.
And it uses a really detailed art example to show this redefining power, right?
That sense, yeah. If you define what art is, that immediately defines who you consider an artist.
Yeah.
So if someone rigidly says art is only about making pretty, decorative objects, they'll instantly dismiss certain, say, woke contemporary artists as not being real artists at all. The definition dictates the perception.
Right. And the source contrasts, well, is it a Warhol screen print with a simple geometric painting? A viewer might reject the Warhol, maybe seeing him through a political lens to artsy-fartsy or too left-wing, even ignoring Warhol's technical skill.
Yeah, exactly. And they might choose the simple geometric piece instead because their definition of art is tied only to, say, ordinariness or pure aesthetics. But the real takeaway from Dynaxiom 3340 isn't about which artwork is better. It's about the internal flexibility, the power to shift your definition of what art means or what value means or what truth means. That ability to redefine, that's what makes life richer. Gives you a much wider range of perspectives to draw on. You can choose to hang the Warhol or store it away, but the value lies in being able to consciously shift its meaning for you.
So pulling all this together, what does this whole deep dive mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of a world built on this informational dark matter and these recurring patterns?
Well, it really highlights the crucial role of your perspective, those cumulative lenses we talked about, from Dynaxiom 3335. That's pretty much the only tool you have to effectively filter that dark matter from 3331. And ultimately, it's your willingness, your ability to constantly question and update your own definitions, like 33340 suggests. That's your essential defense against getting trapped in those cycles of engineered stress and repeating history.
Yeah. In a world where certainty feels cheap and truth, as Dynaxiom 3337 puts it, might just be metaphorical, that ability to shift how you see things really is vital. Which leaves us with maybe one final thought for you to chew on as you step away from this. Building on that last insight from Dynaxiom 3340, how much richer does your life become when you're continuously changing your mind, but perhaps never fully making up your mind? Go explore that dynamic.